Rich, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
How'd you get your start playing golf? Were you born and raised up here in Anchorage?
Born in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
Moved here when I was about 3.5 years old. Didn't pick up a golf club at all until I was probably 15.
You were a hockey player before that?
Yeah, played a lot of sports. Played youth basketball, played basketball through junior high school, played tennis in high school, played football for a year. That was not my thing at all. Got really into tennis for a number of years, but my dad watched golf. He was a big sports buff. He played as a youth back in the Midwest, and one week he asked me if I wanted to go out and caddy for him. He was playing in the Alaska Open. I think he worked for IBM.
Okay.
And I think they sponsored a couple of guys into the tournament.
That was a pro event up here?
It was a pro-am at Eagle Glen.
Okay.
And so that was my first exposure to being on a golf course. Knew nothing about it other than, watched a little golf with him on Sunday afternoons, probably for 15 or 20 minutes, and then I went, hang out with my buddies. But went out. He went through the whole warm-up thing. He was never a really good player. He loved the game. And one thing he really enjoyed was watching myself and my brother play because we became much better players than he ever was. But caddied for him for 3 days at Eagle Glen, and it was an eye-opening experience. I mean, the guys in the group were super cool. I loved being outside. I loved the golf course, just the whole vibe from the golf course. And, you're outside. It's relatively quiet. The banter between the guys was really fun. And at that point, I was kind of like, okay, I want to try this.
So it got you into the camaraderie situation.
Yeah.
But you had kind of had a little bit of that being a hockey player, so you kind of knew what it was like to be a locker room guy.
Yeah,
and
exactly. The social aspect of it was, on par with that, I would say.
And you went to West, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
yep.
Was our hockey team as bad then as we were when I was there?
I would say middle of the pack back in those days. This is before South High School, and so the powerhouse teams were Diamond and Service.
Mm-hmm.
Could beat the other teams on a fairly regular basis, but Diamond and Service were that was almost an insurmountable hockey game.
The original Alaska.
You had one good line, and then everybody else would kind of struggle to compete, and the other schools had four lines of comp hockey players. And
so you picked up a golf club at 15. So then you had a couple summers of, I assume, doing that where kind of you were learning the game. And what was junior golf like in Alaska at that time?
Yeah, that's exactly where it went. I got my driver's license, I think, the next summer, and with my younger brother in tow, we were part of the junior golf program at Moose Run.
It was just the hill course.
It was just the hill course. It was Moose Run Golf Course. It was a hill course. A fella named Lynn McSherry ran the junior golf program there, and he was a former Oregon Open golf champion. I don't know how old he was when I was 16. He could have been in his 50s. It could have been in his 40s. I really don't know. But he had a history of being a pretty good player. There were a number of kids in the junior golf program at that time, and honestly, at that point, I was just trying to make contact with the ball. As a fairly decent athlete growing up, the frustration with just trying to make contact with the golf ball when you're first learning to swing a golf club is like mind-bending, right? It's like the ball's just sitting there and I can't even hit it. But you get the bug, and I think the difficulty of the game was definitely a lure for me.
Yeah, that
right?
pursuit of perfection that you'll never be good enough at.
So many aspects to playing a golf hole. And I really liked that challenge.
Yeah.
And it was something that, as I got a little bit older, probably post-college, because I didn't play for a number of years between high school and going to college, mostly because I didn't have any money. I wanted to get back into it and signed up for a state am. A high school buddy. We kind of.
This is an adult life now?
Yeah, this is adult life. So junior golf
yeah.
was never very successful. Yeah, we can go back.
Well, yeah, I'm interested by this because this was prior to AGC even being open.
Correct.
And so you only had Moose Run Hill,
Eagle Glen, and Settlers Bay had 9 holes.
And Russian Jack.
And we did play Russian Jack. So I had high school buddies. We wore Russian Jack out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's funny.
Did they have concrete greens then?
They did. They had AstroTurf on top of concrete. Yeah. And you'd occasionally hit a really good shot in the air.
Yeah.
And it would land on the green and it would just catapult over the back. And yeah, there was a lot of frustration with that. And the greens would get rips in them and tears and you couldn't really putt them very well. But it was a really good way to kind of cut our teeth. There was very few people out there playing, so we could just go around and around and around
for like $2 or something.
Yeah, it was nothing. They had little plastic tees, like the little simulator tees that they would hand out at the counter, and we would play all day long.
You know, if they could get that in shape and do grass greens and stuff, I mean, that would be the ultimate way to bring some exposure to that, to maybe some neighborhoods where kids would never see golf ever.
Absolutely.
To that Tiger Woods type of person.
Absolutely. I think the First Tee had a program going out there for a few years, but it just never really caught on, unfortunately.
So not much junior golf going on, really. It was kind of just course specific, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And most of the military kids, I assume, were either at Moose Run or Eagle Glen, so you were either mixed with them or something.
Yeah, back in those days, I mean, Eagle Glen was not even really a doable thing. I mean, you go down there. First of all, you had to go through the guard gate, so you had to kind of
before they had the bypass.
Yeah, you had to get cleared kind of to go in there, and then you'd get on the waiting list, and you could sit there all day long and never get on.
Yeah.
So there were a few times where we would go down there in the evenings in the summer, and it was a little quieter, and we'd get on. I can specifically remember going on with a buddy of mine. And we both shot in the mid 120s.
Yeah.
And we were playing by the rules as best as best as we knew them. And I can remember walking off at 18, and we were walking down the little service road there back to the clubhouse, and we looked at each other, and I said, "We're never going to be any good at this game." And really, we were 17 or 18 years old at that point, and losing a lot of golf balls in the creek, and but it was so fun to be on a real golf course with real grass greens and see really what you could do. Right. I mean, can I hit a 120-yard shot over the creek, or am I going to dunk 3 in the water and get frustrated? Or
par 5 power drive coming up right now.
Yeah.
Well, I find it, we don't know.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So there were a few occasions where we'd be able to kind of slide on to Eagle Glen, but mostly, it was a steady dose of Russian Jack for a long time.
So Eagle Glen was the original 18-hole golf course.
Moose Run Hill would have been the original.
Okay, so Moose Run Hill was 18.
Yes.
And then they did Eagle Glen.
Yeah, Eagle Glen, if I recall, was built in the early 70s, about the time we moved here.
That's kind of wild, considering they must have seen a need for it, or the military traffic was so busy at that time, and I guess you're right in the middle of the Cold War.
Yeah.
That, we needed to have something to do for these guys in the summer.
Yeah, and it was, as you know, you played it. It was the place to play.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the place to get on if you could. I mean, it was just, from a design standpoint, from a risk-reward standpoint. I mean, I learned all these things much later in my golf life, but it was just, it was our country club without really having a country club. I mean, it was really, the Robert Trent Jones Jr. design, absolutely cherished every time you got on there. You kind of pinch yourself because you knew you were in for a treat.
Yeah, I remember the gate situation had been solved by the time I got into golf. But I tell everyone, my mom used to drop me off, and it was safe, and it was right there, that type of situation. And it's unfortunate that it closed, but it's part of life, I guess. So you learned kind of in a junior golf program at Moose Run, and I mean, there wasn't really youth golf tournaments at that point.
There were. I actually befriended a kid who was my age that was a several-time Alaska State Junior Golf champion. We became really good buddies. He lived out in Wasilla, and a fellow named Eric Brogdon.
So Settlers.
At Settlers. He played at Settlers. Ironically, works for Nick Bronner now down on the peninsula. But Eric was a super good guy, hell of a player. He was the guy to beat.
Yeah.
And so I did play in the Alaska State Junior Amateur.
How many kids you have?
Boy. My recollection is, I mean, total, they had different age groups. Total, we probably at the peak maybe had 30.
Yeah, so smaller.
Yeah, smaller. In the age category I was in, there were probably, half a dozen guys that could potentially win it.
Okay.
He was tough to beat. He was like playing against Greg back then.
Yeah.
It's like you really had to have your A game going, and he had to have a bad couple of days. But I learned a lot playing with him. Spent a lot of time, several summers in a row out at Settlers Bay with him and his folks. And just, when you're kind of a student of the game, you're trying to gather and take in as much information, learn as much as you can.
Right.
This is pre-internet, obviously, because I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
But
no YouTube golf.
No YouTube golf. Yeah, there was no YouTube lessons or anything like that. I love all the stuff that you can find now.
Yeah, you can, basically learn to build a car today.
Exactly.
And you can also learn how to break your golf swing pretty easily, too.
Yeah, I don't look at a lot of that, but...
smoothest driving man in the organization at this point, so you wouldn't need to.
That's just what came out of the box.
Jeremy Peters.
That just came out of the box.
Right.
But I spent a lot of time watching, listening, playing with better players when I could, and gosh, I can remember those first couple of state AMs.
Just fell in love with it though. Between that time, did you play in college?
No,
didn't play at college.
No.
I mean, did you play for fun in college?
Very little. Man, I was a poor college student.
Where'd you go to school?
UAA.
Oh, so you're local UAA grad, and then it was getting into the working world, and
this was a college job actually. That turned into was going to be kind of a spring and summer gig.
Yeah,
I'd commercial fished the summer before I started here, and the plan was to go back and commercial fish again, and they made it impossible for me to leave. And then it just, I joke that it's kind of like the mafia. Once you get sucked in, you can't get out.
And here you are.
And here I am.
How many years later now, the owner?
36.
36 years later, owner, color art printing. And
yeah.
So when your dad was playing it, you said the Alaska Open.
Yeah.
Was the adult golf scene fairly large at that point?
I have no idea. I don't know. I would assume so.
Yeah.
That was way before I got into any sort of competitive golf situation. I can remember going out with him after my brother and I started playing and taking lessons in the junior golf program, going out and watching the last day of the State Am.
So State Am was going on at that
State Am
point.
was going on.
So were you a kid when, you would have been a kid, or what year were you born?
68.
So Butch Harmon would have won it
prior to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was still big enough at that point.
It was big. You'd have to talk to some of the guys that played back then, but my recollection is it was 2 days on the hill, 2 days at Eagle Glen, and they would kind of alternate days.
Okay.
When I entered my first State Am, which would have been 1989 probably.
Yeah, so I want to talk about like you getting back into it as an adult.
Yeah. And didn't take long. After myself and a couple of friends started playing a little bit and kind of getting back into it, I'm a competitive guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for competitive situations kind of all the time. We talked each other into signing up for the State Am and had to have a handicap, so we had to join the Alaska Golf Association, got a handicap, and absolutely scared shitless the first day. You know, you're like a fish out of water. You're not, never been in this situation before, didn't even really know all the pertinent rules.
You're like, I better hope somebody knows how to tell me what to do.
The guys in the group did for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a third flighter.
So you had no clue what you were even getting into.
Had no idea. Well, I had an idea because I had watched.
Okay.
I'd watched the tournament, the last day for a number of years, and then there were those years where I was just, busy. Yeah, growing up.
Would have loved to have been a fly in the wall when you guys were trying to convince each other we're going to go play tournament golf.
There were probably a few beverages involved and some trash talking, but. Yeah, totally. And the expense obviously was something this was a special event, right? You kind of saved your money up for it.
This was our thing for that summer.
Yeah, didn't play in anything else, really. This was a 4-day deal and 4 days, 4 different golf courses. So you're driving, I think we would have played AGC, Eagle Glen, Moose Hill, and I don't know that Palmer was open yet. I think Palmer opened in the early 90s.
Right at 1990. So
yeah, I do remember playing my first state am out there. I didn't even know they had a golf course in Palmer, and kind of had to get directions on how to get there. But 440 people I think in the state am, and so you had 9 or 10 flights. I mean, it was a big deal.
And you just had no clue how it was going to go. Just said we're going to give it a shot, and
here we go.
So the first day, everyone has the first tee jitters and shakes, but then after that, it was kind of like, well, I'm just playing golf. And then, did you guys have a banquet or something after that?
Yeah,
and that's how you just kind of started to meet people.
Exactly. Yeah, they had a post-tournament Sunday night banquet.
Cool.
All the golf courses showed up. They would donate prizes. Everybody got a raffle ticket.
Yeah.
And, had a nice buffet dinner. They gave trophies out for first, second, third place in every flight.
Wives would come and stuff.
Yeah, you could bring a guest. I mean, it was a big social deal, and
they do that at a hotel or at a course.
Yeah, for a number of years they had it at the West Coast International Inn out there at Jewel Lake. Yeah, they have banquet room in there, and I can remember one downstairs at the Elks Club down on 3rd or 4th.
Talking about some war stories being told.
Oh boy, yeah, it was good stuff. And the social aspect of it I really liked. And so I was kind of, like I said, hook, line, and sinker. It's like this. I want to get better. I want to learn as much as I can about how these good players kind of conduct themselves, how they play the game, how they go about playing the game, what kind of shots they're hitting in certain situations. I think I told you before that I would finish those early years. I would finish my round on any given day.
Prior to championship flight, Rich Teeters. This was
right.
I'm
third, second flight.
Yeah.
And I would drive to whatever golf course the championship flight was playing, and I would go find those last couple of groups and just walk along and watch.
Yeah.
That was my education.
Yeah. And it was pretty darn competitive, and those guys were probably pretty intense, and it was probably as close to. I mean, not saying that you didn't see professional golf at that time, but you don't have the same media coverage then that you have now. And so wherever you could get it, if you were a junkie on it, you wanted to go get it.
Yeah. They would have the local newspaper reporters would be out covering it, taking pictures. So there'd be pictures the next day in the paper. They'd have the standings updated every day in the newspaper. And it was, just an indoctrination into the golf world. My buddies that, we all egged each other on into playing, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
They would go home and, turn on the TV or whatever, and I would go to school, basically at that point. And I did that for a long time. First time I ever saw Greg. Greg was... at that point, he had elevated his game enough to be in the championship flight, but I can remember going out and watching Greg at AGC, hitting balls, playing, being competitive, and the vibe of the last group or the last couple groups on Sunday made you want to be a part of that. You wanted to get good enough to be in that situation.
Right.
At least for me, I wanted to get there, and it took a long time.
Yeah, and I mean that was probably the most interesting thing when I talked to Greg was, okay, let's say at this time frame you wanted to kind of do this and get better and really improve and put some time into this, and he's still saying it, it took 10 years. Because you just need reps.
Exactly.
And you can't get reps as
It's
often
a short
up here.
season. It's a short season. Yeah, I mean, we had Foretee Golf was an indoor golf facility.
Yeah, I remember that.
Didn't want to have any part of that. But yeah, I mean, it's like you got to go do it, and you got to do it a lot. Right. And then when the season's over, and you're starting over.
Prior to all this other stuff that we have now today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the Sim League kind of keeps me swinging the club.
The dome, you didn't have any of the dome.
Nothing.
Even 100-yard, dome is better than just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And Foretee, well, technology at that point hadn't quite caught on. We hadn't had this craze yet on this golf stuff, and indoor golf wasn't as cool.
Yeah. My family had a Alaska Club membership at the time.
Yeah.
And the Alaska Club had a small little area down by the tennis courts with a net, and you could hit golf balls in there.
Was that at the original location on Tudor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah.
It was just a green net with a mat.
And I can remember poking my head in there, and it's like, this doesn't look like fun. Yeah, this doesn't look like fun. Yeah, so you started over. Every spring it was, you're like a bear coming out of hibernation.
Yeah.
You're starting over. You have no idea what you got. It takes a while to kind of get it going.
So do you remember the mindset at that point in time where you were at when you said, you know what, I really enjoy this, but I also want to do better and maybe take this a little bit more seriously than what I have? Do you remember that point in time when it was, or if there was a turning point?
I would say, I don't remember exactly, but I would say it was probably early on, pretty early on. Once in my mind, I committed to the fact that this is something I want to see how good I can get.
Yeah.
And if I can be competitive, I never thought in a million years I'd be competing for a state am title or a match play or any of that stuff. My game was just not that good.
Yeah.
It just was not that good. I mean, I could scrape it around, and if I had, if I played Eagle Glen and didn't lose a golf ball, that was that was a good day.
Right. But it's still kind of interesting though, because everyone starts in the same. We've literally all started in the same spot. We don't have a ton of expectations, and then for whatever reason, something happens or some moment in time happens where all of a sudden it's, we want to dedicate some time to it, and then all of a sudden it becomes something that's pretty important in our own life.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm curious, like being a business owner and stuff, I'm sure that at the same time, golf can almost be a mental release from what's going on from work, because you have to be so mentally clear in order to even hit the ball.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, it's. I can't think of a better way to spend 4 or 5 hours of any day other than walking around and playing golf.
Yeah.
I joke with friends that are churchgoers, and I go, man, if you want to have a religious experience,
come with me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. It's a nice way to clear your mind, but you do have to be focused on what you're doing.
It's just cool that I mean, everyone, like I said, that is really where it all starts, is that, I think that sometimes people can be a little intimidated at, hey, I'm just not good enough to do this or do a state am thing. And you guys joined on the basics of a bet with each other.
Yeah. I mean, 400 people playing, we can't be the worst ones. So I think we kind of went in with that mindset probably, and we had no idea where we would fit into the equation here.
Right.
Are we going to be in the 7th or 8th flight? We knew we weren't going to be in one of the first couple flights because, at that time we were, 12 or 13 handicap golfers. And but just the experience of the event, how they ran the tournament, the post-tournament stuff, it was a big deal. It was the golf event of the summer.
It felt official.
Yeah. I mean, it felt as big time up here as you were going to get.
Right.
Until, you start trying to qualify for USGA events and that sort of thing.
Right. And you didn't know that was just the tip of the iceberg for what was to come later on.
No.
And so that's what's so cool, is it kind of takes you anywhere. But, let's fast forward now just a second. So at what point in time did your game, what's your handicap now?
I think right now it's 1.8.
And what'd you start at when you really first signed up?
From the very beginning?
Yeah.
I probably still have my original handicap card because every 2 weeks you could go by the AGA office and they'd have new stickers and you could put it on a card. And I would track that to
before
see.
Before they do the digital thing.
Yes, exactly. You could track, am I improving from 1 year to the next or not, or from 1 month to the next? I mean, you had, you carried it around. And
you had to go on the computer and you had to enter it at the course.
Exactly. Or at the office.
Right.
Probably started, honestly, I think probably the first handicap I had, I was probably a 13 or 14. I mean, I'm just throwing a number out there. I remember being specifically a 12 or a 13.
Yeah.
And improved pretty quickly to a point.
Right.
And then you kind of hit a wall.
Right. And I was going to ask you how big that leap is, because from 20 to 10, you can get down there fairly quick if you're just smart. It's that next step from, I would say, 7, 6 down to 0. It gets really hard.
Yeah. The lowest I've ever been is a 0.2.
Yeah.
Okay. And I never thought I would ever get there.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 12 or 13, breaking 80 is kind of the goal. That's kind of the benchmark. But then as you improve, I think for me, I looked at the game differently with a different set of eyes than I did in previous years. And you're trying to improve not only your overall ball striking, but you're trying to hit it into specific spots on a golf hole or onto a green, and
your decision
making becomes totally different. I read a lot of books back in the day. I think I started with Harvey Pinnock's Little Red Book, which was just little quick golf lessons. Read Dave Pell's Short Game Bible. Read
Ben Hogan, I'm sure.
I've got a bookshelf. Some of them are just fun books, but a lot of them were instructional. A lot of that stuff I still incorporate into my game.
Yeah.
I would say going from a 5 or a 6 down to a 1 is like climbing Mount McKinley.
Yeah.
Compared to going from maybe a 15 to a 10. Yeah, that happens relatively quickly, and then you do hit a wall.
Right.
And at that point, I really had to look at what are my weaknesses? What am I not good at? Because it's easy to go to the driving range and just hit a bucket of drivers and have a good time, try to hit it over the fence at Eagle Glen, and
Aaron Roth.
Aaron Roth. Yeah.
We'll bleep that one later.
and so I had to take, I really did take a hard look at what are the parts of my game that I need to improve to even go from a 5 to a 4 or a 4 to a 3. And I was never a very good long iron player.
Yeah. So what was that realization that came? So you said long iron.
Yeah, I was never a very good long iron player. I rarely hit a 3-wood off the ground, believe it or not.
Just was never comfortable with it.
Yeah, just didn't look right, didn't feel right. But I knew that was something I had to be able to do. Right? You can't hit driver on a par 5 and then hit a couple of 7-irons into the green. You're not going to ever get it close, right?
Unless you're just hitting the ball different. You've got to be able to.
You've got to be able to put scoring clubs in your hands. And I was always a pretty good wedge player, I felt. The short game was pretty good, but can always improve. So I'm always working on that.
Was that something you practiced a lot earlier in your time? Because, I mean, that's the easiest way. Number one, you're not losing a ton of golf balls. But 2, it's something that doesn't cost a lot of money to go do.
Yeah.
Chipping, pitching, putting, getting up and down, those types of things are, I think, not as much fun, but that's really where the money's made.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, that's where you win and lose golf tournaments. I mean, that's half the game, really.
Right.
And it took me a while to even understand that.
Yeah.
That, half the game is 100 yards in, and then putting is half. When my boys were young, didn't have a lot of free time, didn't have a lot of extra money, I would go down to Eagle Glen at lunch on my lunch hour here 3-4 times a week.
And so, so you were finding ways.
I was finding ways to practice.
Right.
Didn't have a lot of time to play. If I got out once a week, that felt pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it felt like I was getting away with something there. But the practice was my golf for a long time. Yeah. And it was very dedicated practice. I didn't just go down there and get a bucket of balls and just bang them out there. I was literally, even as a 7 or 8 handicap, I was working on hitting golf shots.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go over and chip for 15 or 20 minutes and then putt and then get in the car and come back to work.
Yeah.
I think that did more for my overall game back in the day than playing. Because I wasn't a very good player.
Well, and you got to, I mean, if you were only playing once a week, you probably saw, even though it takes a long time for your handicap to start to dip, at that point in time, you probably saw improvements that were more readily seen when you were actually playing because of that amount of practice you were doing.
Yeah.
That whole 5 practices to 1 game type mentality, you got to actually see the after effect of that.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt. And I think that helped fuel the fire.
Right.
Because when I did go play, all of a sudden I was on the cusp of breaking 80 on a fairly regular basis, even though that was still the goal.
Right.
And then, you get the handicap down a little bit, your game improves, and then, 72 becomes the number.
Yeah.
And you're trying to, can I shoot under par?
Yeah.
And then you do that, and now you're trying, how many rounds a year can I shoot in the 60s?
Yeah, that frustrating, you break the 80 the first time, and then you expect to do it every time. That's really not likely at all.
No. A lot of people have told me that the first time they broke 80, they shot 75. And the first time I broke 80, I shot 79.
Yeah.
I remember specifically it was on the hill course. And, I couldn't wait to get home to tell my wife I broke 80. I mean, that was a big deal. That was...
She probably was like,
she could have cared less.
Cool, but me, I was elated.
I was on cloud 9, man.
I was carrying the scorecard around for a month.
I probably still have the scorecard, God. Just a lot of, I practiced then way more than I practice now. I almost never practice now, unfortunately, unless I'm, doing the sim golf thing.
Yeah.
My practice now is my warm-up before a round, and I play way more golf now in my life at this point in time than I did before. But I think all that work I did in those early years on my lunch hour paid tremendous dividends.
Well, you get to the point where, okay, I understand striking the ball. I understand concepts about moving balls one direction or another.
Yeah.
No matter how many times you chip on a practice green, putt on a practice green, hit a range ball, it doesn't equate to, I need to hit this shot in this moment. And that kind of is a difference between, a higher handicap player and maybe a lower handicap player, is that when there's a shot that needs to be hit or not hit, the lower handicap player, needs maybe that on-course practice perhaps a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, with the price of golf, you don't get to play ever enough.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think you can ever play enough, quite honestly.
Right.
Yeah. I think some of the strategy, maybe in the moment.
Yeah.
Those are things that you learn by trial and error, I think. Yeah. I certainly did. Depending on what the shot is, there's a variety of different ways to hit a shot.
Yeah.
And I weigh all of that before I hit it now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking... I'm thinking about the shot. What do I want to, what am I trying to accomplish here? Do I want to hit a low checker? Do I need to flop it in there?
Yeah.
Back in the early days, man, I was, if I was off the green, I was just trying to put it on the green.
Right.
So I had a putt.
And you're kind of known for being, from an emotional standpoint, cooler heads tend to prevail. Did that take practice for, hey, I need to keep my emotions in check when something not right happens?
Big time. I was a club thrower when I was in high school. I can remember bending
it
the
just
shaft.
doesn't seem possible knowing you now.
I'll give a little shout out to Kevin Daniels. I was Kevin Daniels for a while. And I love the fire.
Yeah.
But I think controlling that is a very powerful thing. And I think if you can, it's okay to have the fire burning in there.
Yeah.
But when your opponents see that, they kind of got you. You've kind of lost your edge,
they eat it
right?
Up.
Yeah.
The good players eat it up.
Yeah, for sure. I can remember in the early years in high school. I mean, I used my dad's clubs.
Yeah.
That was the set of golf clubs at home, and I remember walking on Eagle Glen by myself one afternoon, and got paired up with 3 military guys, and I hit a terrible shot with the 3-wood off the tee, and flung the club.
Here we go.
And it wrapped around a tree, and I'm trying to bend the shaft back, and that was not good.
Before they snapped.
I think the clubs got benched for a while.
Yeah.
I think being clear-headed and keeping the emotions in check. I mean, it's okay to, Tiger is known for his early days where he'd fist pump and do all that stuff. I mean, I love that. That's great. That's just not necessarily who I am.
Yeah. They're in a different
league anyway. But I think,
I mean, I'd streak if I won $1 million, so it is what it is.
Right on.
I mean,
I might too.
I'd Happy Gilmore it right into the pond.
I love it.
I don't care.
I love it. I think the mental side of the game doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, for sure. And you started to then kind of see some of the fruits of your labor. You were named to a Pub Links team, if I'm not correct, right? Or you won the Pub Links?
No, never won the Pub Links.
Okay.
The state team, USGA state team, I was the 4th guy on the points list.
Like the 4-ball?
It kind of evolved into the 4-ball. Yeah, they took 3 players from every state, and we had a qualification system that was set up. And I can remember being 4th 3 different times. Okay. And that event did not happen every year, I don't think. I think it happened every other year. But that hurt. I mean, that...
Being so close.
Being that close. Being so close that you could taste it and getting left off. And I'd had, Greg would go.
Right.
Benji would go. They'd come back. You'd hear these stories, and it's like, man...
Yeah.
Am I ever going to get the chance?
Playing for something different than just yourself, like for your actual state, and representing something matters. That's cool.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun. Never happened.
But didn't you did a mid-am something?
Won a mid-am.
Yeah, so you won a mid-am qualifier.
Yeah.
Was that the first thing that you kind of had success at?
Other than some spring and fall jackpots?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
First individual event. Is it a mid-am qualifier?
Yeah, 2008. Qualified for the mid-am. And
where was that at? Up here?
Eagle Glen.
So Eagle Glen, how many people were playing in that?
I don't remember.
Because Alaska wasn't really on the map for a while.
No,
to come do
but
that
we did have the Pub Links qualifier, and we had the mid-am qualifier had been going on for a number of years.
And you had some U.S. Open qualifying stuff, but that was typically pretty low-key out at Settlers a lot.
Yeah, I didn't play in the first one of those until just recently, quite honestly. But I will tell you this. Shot 72 in the mid-am qualifier at Eagle Glen, tied Greg.
Yeah.
And I thought, here we go, we're going to go to a playoff.
Yeah.
Right? And again, we're walking down that little service road back to the pro shop, and Greg says, can you go?
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, if I pull this out.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I've already signed up as an official. I'm going to be an official for the mid-am, so I'm going to do that. Yeah. And if you want the spot, it's yours.
Yeah.
And man,
kind of a full circle moment.
It was. Yeah, I was at that point. It was, oh my God, pinch me.
Yeah. And did you even know that you were in contention at that point? Or?
I was playing with Greg.
So you knew if you kept up with Greg, there was some opportunity there.
Yeah. The feeling I got was it was, especially in the back nine, that it was him and I at that point. It was Eagle Glen. The conditions were really good. It was boy, I want to say it was probably late August.
Yeah.
And the event was in early October.
Yep.
So it was a pretty quick turnaround.
Right at prime time then. Prime time and, not much else going on.
Yeah.
Golf was kind of in a recession at that point, so you probably weren't getting the same traffic.
Right.
The course was probably immaculate, as you said.
Yeah, it was. It was in phenomenal shape. I can remember some of my golf moments. I can remember like they happened yesterday. I remember I think I made a 5-footer on 18 for par. I'd been in trouble off the tee, had hooked the tee shot left, had to punch out.
Yeah.
I think I had to lay up, knocked it on to about 5 feet and made it. So, and at that point,
you were definitely feeling could this happen?
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you my match play story later, but it was a similar moment where, you're standing over the putt and you know what's on the line.
This putt could
This
matter.
is it right here.
Yeah.
This is it right here.
Right.
Very cool moment, very gracious of Greg to go and officiate, and got an opportunity to play. Worked on my game as much as I could leading up to it.
Where was it at?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
It was at Milwaukee Country Club.
Cool.
The other course was Brown Deer Park, which hosted a PGA Tour event back in those days.
And they do that because of the amount of participants during the stroke play.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's one round on each, and then if you make match play, you're in match play. But Milwaukee Country Club was the host course, and the pairings came out probably 2 weeks before the event, and one of the guys that I played with was is Buddy Marucci, who was the Walker Cup captain at the time.
Right.
And he was a runner-up to Tiger Woods in a USAM. I think Tiger's first USAM victory, he played Buddy.
Right.
And so Buddy is a very well-known, lifelong amateur. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, "Oh my God, we've achieved the big time here, right?" I mean, this is major pressure. I knew he was the Walker Cup captain. Couldn't have been a nicer guy.
Yeah.
And his golf game was so much better than mine. There was such a huge separation between where my game was at that point in time and what he was doing. It was really, really eye-opening. I mean, the guy was a pro, really. Yeah. And again, seeing that and seeing what he was doing at his age made me even hungrier to try to get back there and do it again.
Can I take it?
Right.
And I think that's the coolest part about the mid-amateur stuff is, that is in its purest form playing for the love of it. Because everybody at that point is a working person. Yeah. Nobody's making a living playing golf anymore. Like, you're not playing Division I college guys. Everybody from 25 and up, it's like, we all are going somewhere on 8 a.m. on Monday, and it's not a golf course.
Exactly. Yeah, and the senior tour is out of the question.
And that is also, to me, just even more impressive at how good guys can be at that stage of their life.
Oh, 2 weeks, he missed the match play cut by a shot. I remember walking into the scoring tent after our second qualifying round, and he asked the officials what the number was, and they said 150, and he shot 151. Myself and the other guy were way back.
So 140 wasn't going to cut it.
150 got into a playoff. So pair of 75s would have got into a playoff.
But the courses are set up completely different.
Oh, they're
diabolical.
Yeah, they're jacked up. And it's fun to see that. The conditions are as pure as they're going to get. But just to tell you how good he was playing at that time, 2 weeks after that, he won the USGA Senior Amateur. And
he was a senior playing in a mid-am. That's how good he was.
Correct. He was playing in that mid-am. They made an announcement at the player dinner that was his 50th USGA championship.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, let's go back and do the math. How many is that a year for a number of years? But again, seeing what just a really cool guy he was very engaging. He would talk to you.
Yeah.
They flew his caddy in from Augusta National. His caddy was an Augusta National caddy, who I talked to on the shuttle back to the hotel. So this is next level golf, like we just don't see. But it was super cool to participate in that, get that experience, and kind of keep the fire burning.
Sure.
Because at that point I was 40.
Yeah.
And I think he was probably 55 or 56. And I knew even then I can get better.
Yeah, and I got more runway. I got more runway to get better.
Right. It's just you got to put in the reps. Right. You got to put in the work. And so I made a concerted effort really right after that to, how can I, because at that point in time I was probably a 3 handicap.
Sure.
So I was on the high end of the scale at that event.
Sure.
If you looked at all the handicap indexes of the players.
+5.
Oh yeah, and I was probably one of the top couple.
Yeah.
But played really well for me. Shot a pair of 83s.
And
that's how tough the golf courses were.
Didn't come in last.
Did not come in last. Close, but did not finish last.
Cool.
But wonderful experience, and that helped me down the line because shortly after that, I got into my final group for the first time in the State Am, and at that point, I had kind of been in a pressure cooker.
That first day, that's that last day where, oh crap, there's only 3 of us left here.
Exactly. Yeah. It was Eagle Glen again. It was myself, Greg, Casey Cusack, and Hal Willardson. And it was a spooky thing. I didn't really know what to expect. My dad was caddying for me.
Was this before Carlton or after?
Oh, that's a good question. I want to say it was before.
Okay.
I want to say it was before.
So you could have looked at it. You could have looked at Carlton.
Yeah.
And said,
I've
been here before.
It was. It definitely was before because that was Chena Ben. I'm thinking now that was. Love that guy too.
Yeah.
So for those of you that haven't been in a final group of a State Am on Sunday, you show up, you park, and back then at Eagle Glen there was not a lot of parking. I can remember I was way out on the service road.
Yep.
Because the parking lot's full. Yeah. Everybody's on the golf course.
You're right by the fish hatchery.
Literally.
Today.
Literally.
You're
walking in, and you're going through your warm-up, and pretty soon there's nobody left on the driving range but you and the other 3 guys, and then they're calling you to the tee, and that was a cool experience in and of itself.
It's a little more serious in that last group.
Exactly. Not a lot of banter going on, but that's part of the competition.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to really embrace that and want that.
Yep.
My buddy Benji always said, you want to embrace and enjoy the pressure of the moment.
With a beer.
For him, with a beer. Yeah. Yeah. Wise words, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It was, it's true.
Yeah.
You've got to want that.
Right.
I think if you're going to really compete.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of people that probably think they do want it, but they have no idea. In a sense, until that moment comes.
Yeah.
Like you might think you want it, but then you don't know.
Or you think you want it and then it happens and you're not prepared.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of younger guys ask me, because I've played in a lot of State Ams, a lot of golf tournaments over the course of my golf life, if I get nervous anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, I do, but it's a different nervous.
It's an excitement.
Yeah. It's like going in for an exam, a high school test or whatever, and if you know the material,
right,
you're ready.
If you cram the night before,
you're ready.
Wondering.
And in those early golf days, I was not ready. I was just doing it. I was kind of going through the motions, and the pressure of just showing up and playing with 3 strangers was enough.
Sure.
Pressure. Now, it's more of a nervous energy to get going. It's like, I want to go out there and do this. I'm ready.
But that's what's so cool about, we have the flight system for a reason, is you get a taste of that in the first flight and the second flight, but I mean, when you kind of see it in person, that championship flight or whatever it is, and I'm right there with you, like when, final state am day with Adam Baxter or state match play day, and there's 4 people on the course because it's pouring so hard. Do I really want to be here, or do I not want to be here?
Yeah.
And, stuff happens and you figure out a way to deal with it, but until you kind of get those reps, and that's what's so cool about First Flight. You're playing with people that are on your skill level. So you are not feeling overwhelmed. You're not feeling underwhelmed. You're kind of right where you should be.
Yeah, you're trying to beat the guys in your group.
And just working your way up to what that may or may not be.
Yep. Exactly.
So you've had some success now.
Some.
Well, I mean,
minor success.
You played in some final groups. You got some reps in. You started to, see improvement. I think probably more of the improvement you were looking for. I'm in final groups. I'm shooting better scores, and there's still one other hump to get over, and that's a state title. And you broke the seal.
Broke the seal. Adam Baxter told me many years, and I think he was trying not to hurt my feelings. He said, "You are the best player in the state that hasn't won anything."
Adam has a way of digging deep.
He was right.
Yeah.
He was right. And the question you ask yourself is, why hasn't that happened?
Yeah.
Either you're just not playing well, you're having a bad week, the week of the tournament, and then you got to wait a whole year for it to come back around.
That's the hardest part about being here is
you've got a condensed golf calendar as it is, and so if you're not playing well for 2 or 3 months, a 2 or 3 month stretch, you got a whole year before you get another crack at it.
Right.
And who knows what your game's going to look like next year. Recently was able to break the seal, as you would say.
Yeah. And so 2022.
22. And so
had you gotten close before and taken second a couple of times?
Finished 4th a number of times in the stroke play, in the state am stroke play.
Okay.
And then made the semifinals probably 3 or 4 times in the match play and just couldn't get over that hump.
You were right there. And so at that point, you're just wondering what am I missing this detail here?
Exactly.
And that's
because,
frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, you're putting, I knew I was putting in the work. I was diligently practicing, like I said, certain aspects of my game leading up to all these events. I mean, you're really putting in the work. You're just not showing up and hoping.
Right.
Just never put it together, I guess, might be a good way to say it. And then 2022.
And you didn't have an easy path to get your first one either.
I didn't.
No.
I'm gonna start by saying this. So in May of that year, my dad passed away.
Yeah.
And he was my biggest golf fan.
Yeah.
And he really, if he was in town, he lived down in the Seattle area. If he was in town and the state am was going on, he wanted to caddy.
Yeah.
And that was fine. I loved having him out there, and he didn't say a whole lot. He was kind of the perfect caddy. He might say, "Hey, put a good swing on this," or whatever. Or,
he's ultimate. He's a cheerleader.
Yeah, he was the ultimate cheerleader.
Your parent would be.
And so, he never got to experience any of that with me, which is sad. But the stars kind of aligned, and I'd like to say I actually had a pretty tough road.
Was this a rare year where we had played the state am before the match play? I think it was.
Maybe.
I think we had played it at Palmer.
But we could have.
And then we did match play.
And then we did the match play. Okay, I'd have to look back at that. But that very well could be. But I will tell you this. The Sunday before qualifying, went out to the Creek course with Benji Jung and Mark McMahon to play a practice round. And, I mean, my game came completely unhinged. I think I shot 90, believe it or not. And on the drive home after that round, I told Benji, I said, "Holy crap!"
I didn't show up.
this is nuts. I mean, what just happened? And he goes, yeah, you just got to brush that off. That's just an anomaly, right? I mean, just don't even think about that.
And that's the creek.
He goes, you're swinging the club good. I mean, just keep doing what you're doing. And played pretty well in qualifying. I don't know if I was the 5th or 6th seed, probably.
Yeah.
You know, shot a fairly decent number, got in easily.
And if I recall, nobody really played that well at qualifying.
No.
It was a grind.
It was.
And that was 2 days of qualifying, not one.
Correct.
On the creek.
Correct. Right. And yeah, because it's a lot easier. You know, back in the old Pub Links qualifier days, it was 36-hole qualifier, but you did it one day.
Right.
Yeah, so you might play well today and not so well tomorrow.
Right.
Or vice versa. But played well enough in qualifying to get in, which is always a goal, right? Mm-hmm. You want to get into that 16-man field. And then the bracket comes out, and I have Aaron Roth in my first match, and I thought, you know, here we go, right? And had a hell of a tough match with Aaron. I think I birdied 18 to beat him one up.
Yeah, you did.
And then
we were playing together.
Yeah, and then got you in the second round. You were the defending champ, and I thought this is probably where it comes to an end right here. But played well enough to get by you, and then had Todd Millard in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And going back to my dad passing away, specifically in that match, because I've been in the semifinal a number of times and never been able to advance. I got a couple of absolutely incredible bounces.
Yeah.
And
with Todd.
With Todd, against Todd specifically.
Yeah. And we all know who Todd is. He hits the ball about 390.
Yeah. And he got some really unfortunate bounces too, if I recall.
Yeah.
But I can remember thinking, I think the old man's up there pulling some strings maybe here for me, so maybe this is my weekend. And had another tough match with Todd, got by him, and then got Adam in the final. Yeah. And Adam had eliminated me in the semis more than a couple of times.
Yeah.
And as we all know, you know, Adam's won I don't know how many state titles, 4 or 5.
Right behind Greg.
Yeah, right. And I thought, all right, I mean, if you're gonna beat this guy, now's the time.
This is the road.
Right, this is it. I mean, you got to beat the best if you want to be the best.
Yeah.
And Adam and I had just an epic final, back and forth the whole way. I think at one point on the back 9, it might have been the 15th hole. Yeah, it was 15. It was a par 3. I made probably a 3-footer on some not so good greens for par to maintain like a 2-up lead.
Yeah.
And then 16, I think we both hit it in trouble at one point or another. And we went to 17, and you know, tees are back. Adam missed the green left of the cart path.
Yeah, and jail.
Yeah, almost no backswing. And he had the honor because I think he had won 16, if I recall. And so I was 1 up with 2 to go. Mm-hmm. And on that long walk over to 17, I told myself, you do not want to play 18.
Yeah.
I mean, he can potentially knock it on in 2, and I don't have that game. And so we need to do this right here, right now.
And you guys are the only 2 out there.
Yeah, other than family and a couple people watching.
Yeah.
Benji was watching because he had been in the senior final, which was in our group, up until he closed out his match. And I remember hitting my tee shot just off the front left of the green. Adam chipped it, I don't know, probably 8 feet by. Mm-hmm. And I did not hit a very good chip. Maybe chipped it to 4 feet.
Yeah.
And Adam missed.
17.
This is on 17. Adam missed, so he conceded bogey. So I'm 1 up. I've got a 3-footer to win it. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time in a state event you're in that situation.
Yeah.
And I can remember clearly standing over the putt, and you're trying to clear your mind.
Right.
And the only thing I could think, and it actually brings a smile to my face at this point, was I told myself, this is the one you've been waiting for. Yeah. And I'm thinking back to all those years 20 plus years, you've been trying everything in your power to improve your game, to put yourself in this position.
Yeah.
And it would have went in a hole the size of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was in the moment I hit it. And the relief, you cannot, you just can't, I mean, you cannot put words on it. It was super emotional. My dad had passed.
Yeah.
This is a couple months after that. And Deanna had come out to caddy for me, for the final. So she was riding around in the cart, and we both got emotional on the cart ride back to the clubhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a really cool moment. You finally achieved something that you thought was not achievable.
It almost doesn't feel real.
Yeah, it
feels out of body.
It took a long time. You get the trophy. We went home, had the trophy on the dining room table. My phone is exploding. People are finding out that I've won, and I'm getting all kinds of congratulations from people, and that was really special.
Yeah.
But then after the dust settles and you kind of accept the fact that you've done this,
right,
you want to do it again.
Yeah, it's like you're addicted to it. It's like a whole nother sport.
Yes. You're addicted to getting yourself back in the mix to have the opportunity to do it again. And fortunately, if you count the 4-ball that ET and I won, I've won a senior stroke play, senior state am, and a senior match play now.
And so you kind of almost got your slam.
Right. The stroke play would be the missing link. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't.
Do you put any emphasis on one maybe weighing of more importance to the other to you?
I would say the men's match play is the pinnacle of my golf success.
Yeah.
The mid-am, qualifying for the mid-am is a big deal.
Right.
That's definitely right there. The stroke play, on the back nine, it was down to Rob and I.
Yeah.
And it was on the creek, and we were riding in a cart together.
Yeah. Something about the creek for you. Huh?
Yeah. I don't know if it's all the trouble on the creek or I mean, when you bunt it, you don't put it into trouble very often.
You're not bumping it anymore.
Well, that was another situation where got to the last hole, and Rob and I are tied.
Yeah.
And playing 18. I mean, he hits it 40 or 50 past me, so I can't play his game. I got to play my game. We both hit really good drives, and I'm hitting the first, second shot, and so I'm laying up. So I lay up to what I think is a pretty good number, and surprisingly, he pulled out a 3-wood, and he was going for it, right?
Yeah.
And pushed a little bit, went into the junk on the right. We got up. I had probably 100 yards in.
Yeah.
Knocked a pitching wedge to 10 or 15 feet, whatever it was. We ended up finding his ball. He didn't have much of a play. Punched it out. Knocked it up onto the green, and I made the 15-footer for birdie again to win by one. And he ended up making his par putt. But he told me at the time, he said, "That's how you do it."
Yeah.
And I never really looked at myself or thought of myself as the guy that could make a big time pressure putt like that on the last hole. But I guess if I'm patting myself on the back, I've done it a number of times. So I've got a little bit of a penchant for being able to kind of block it out and just, execute the shot, which, I mean, this is small time stuff. If you're winning the Washington State Amateur or the Washington State, match play, it's a bigger deal.
Sure.
But for an Alaskan guy, those wins are, I'm proud of that.
Right.
I'm proud of that.
But there is also a certain stigma, right? Surrounding, how big's the tournament? But if you think about it, in a sense, it almost means so much more here because everyone just knows everyone.
Yeah.
And I think the best part of that is people may be upset about the way that they've played. and they may have some instances where, maybe they didn't agree with something or whatever it is, but there's not one guy in the organization that is not happy for the person that's won.
Yeah.
And
that's different.
So cool.
Yeah, that is different. I would say that the limited experience I've had playing outside, that does not happen.
No, it's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we understand, the conditions are not always supreme.
Yeah.
Right? This is not country club golf. But most importantly, we're friends with each other. And as much as you want to go and beat each other's brains in, at the end of the day, man, if your buddy wins it, you're happy for him.
And everyone can leave it there.
Yes.
And that's like...
Yeah, there's no grudge or bad feelings or anything like that. No, I've never experienced that here.
It's only been with someone from outside at some point.
Right.
But they may have been about for a one-day event or something.
Yeah, exactly. You'll get the outsiders that come up and and try to qualify, and you can tell there's a vibe or an attitude that's just different than us.
Yeah.
And I think they see the difference in us when they're playing with us.
Sure.
And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely. And I think too the tightness of that camaraderie, and we're all going through the same thing. And I think there's just an appreciation for, despite everything that's stacked against us, the northernmost state, northernmost climate, shortest season, some pretty damn good players up here for all things considered.
Yeah. I mean, you take a look at somebody like Greg, who goes out and competes on a very regular basis in senior tournaments all over the country, and he's winning at times, and he's a homegrown product.
Yeah.
So, and he was a guy that when he started playing up here was a
second flighter.
Third flighter or second flighter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if you put in the time, and I think if you do things the right way, you play the game the right way, you follow the rules, I think at some point the golf gods kind of smile on you a little bit. But yeah, we've got plenty of good players up here.
Yeah.
For as small an organization as we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people find out, oh, you won this or that, and they're like, well, how many guys were playing? And it's like, I'm not even going to argue with you because they beat you. So you can't really talk.
No, for sure. I mean, you get those messages.
And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, how many times have the quote unquote outsiders come up here and won our qualifiers? It doesn't happen every year.
I mean, they may get the benefit of the doubt at the U.S. Open qualifiers, but that's simply because a lot of the times we're coming right out of. We've been outside for 3 weeks. And you've been playing all winter or whatever you're doing. But I mean, I'll tell you that a lot of those guys are, the friendly ones specifically will tell you that this is some of the hardest golf they've ever played because there's so much outside of your control.
Absolutely. Condition-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weather-wise, I mean, it could be cold during a U.S. Open qualifier, and some of those guys are not used to that, and you'd think that'd be a big advantage for us, and I think it has been at times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the poorer the conditions are, the harder golf is.
Yeah.
I can't imagine like the Scots that invented the game and started playing the game. I mean, putting would have been impossible, right? But yeah, I think when you go play on a pristine golf course, that's way easier.
Well, and I mean when we talk tree line, right? Yeah. Tree line here is different than tree line somewhere else.
Yes.
In a place like the creek eats people alive.
Yeah, I mean you don't hit it very far off the fairway and it's a lost ball potentially.
Yeah, it's just a different game.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you hit it in the trees, down in the States, and usually they're limbed up.
Yeah.
And you can find it and at least punch it out and keep going.
Yeah, and fairways are just not as big. I mean, our width is just not there on a lot of our courses. Like, you go to Arizona, fuck, I could hit this off the planet. And
it's a driving range.
It's on the grass,
right?
But here it's just different.
Yeah.
So it's super cool that you've had that success, and obviously it's meant a lot, not just to you, but I mean to anyone that's friends with you and all of those lifelong friends that you've made in the organization. But you've taken that even a step further. You've also been a board of director for the Alaska Golf Association for how many years now?
Ooh, 10 maybe?
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Yeah, probably 10. Kind of came on when Benji was going off. Benji asked me if I would take his position on the board, and went to a board meeting, and of course they're looking for people to help and volunteer, and I thought, man, what a great way to give back.
Yeah.
That didn't take a lot of time. We've definitely put more time in here recently, which is overdue.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see the benefits from that hard work. It may not happen, necessarily this summer, but I think over the course of time, we've got a really good core group of people, a lot of young guys like yourself. And, it's a great way to give back. It doesn't always come with smiles and cheers. You get plenty of critics, but we've always tried to do things the right way. Include all of the golf courses in all of our events. And if that means going to Fairbanks once every 2 or 3 or 4 years, that's the right thing to do, even though most of the players are from Anchorage. We've always put our best foot forward, and I think for the Alaska Golf Association, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, and what kind of things, have been, I don't know if we can talk about all of them, but I'm sure that there's some things that maybe you could give us some inside scoop on what we could expect this year. For the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's been kind of a series of transitions that have not necessarily led to a falter in the AGA, but obviously we've had some memberships, decrease and so on and so forth. But, in your mind, there really is something for everyone at the AGA. You don't have to be the uber competitive like we've kind of talked about for the last 20 minutes, but there really is something there for, a young professional, a middle-aged person that's looking for a new group, maybe that former hockey player that doesn't want to go to the rink at 10 o'clock at night, so on and so forth. You've seen that, but what kind of things can we expect moving into this season that you think is going to kind of bring that back into prominence for our state?
Yeah, one thing, obviously we've got Kyle and Zach on the board, and they are in the process of kind of rebranding along with you, the AGA, doing some membership drives, trying to get more juniors involved, as well as potentially their parents. You've got our bookend events, which are the spring jackpot and the fall jackpot, which are kind of the fun events for everybody, and those typically do pretty well from a participation standpoint. And what you hope, and this certainly got me, is you go, you compete, you have fun, you can see where you kind of stack up with everybody, but then there's the social aspect that comes with that, where you're playing with new people. I can tell you that I've got a couple of lifelong buddies that I grew up with. We went from kindergarten through 12th grade, and they're like brothers to me. But my best friends right now, I met through golf. Those people are equally important to me in my personal life as my old-time friends. But when you play in these events, you are meeting people from really all walks of life. And what you find is you have way more in common than you do differences. One of which is you got obviously a love for playing golf. And so I would encourage people to come out, give it a try. We're gonna attempt at some point here down the line to get back to having a post-state am banquet awards dinner of some kind, where we can bring that social aspect back into the game. Right now people turn in their scorecard, go home,
see you later.
That's it.
And they're not going home to do anything in particular.
Well,
it's a Sunday.
Maybe cry about their golf game. I don't know, but
it's a Sunday, right? So
honestly, I look very forward to finishing the state am when it was over, going home, get cleaned up,
Yeah.
go to the banquet. You get to rub elbows.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the winners. I mean, you get to see these guys. That was a big deal back then.
And it's led to maybe invitation to some non-formal events that, you know, lend itself to maybe just as equal a prominence as what AGA's got going on, like the Birdie Juice Cup. I mean,
exactly.
That thing has absolutely exploded in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, they got wait lists for people to get into that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, you know, Wes and Casey and Trey and Herschel, I mean, they obviously put a lot of time into it. It's a fun event, but it's competitive.
Yeah.
But the social aspect, again, of that event is kind of what brings everybody together.
Right.
And they do such a good job running that, I mean, I've seen it grow just in the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
You know, at one point, I think maybe they had, you know, a dozen guys on a team or something like that, and now there's over 20 on a team.
It's like turning into almost a Ryder Cup thing where it's going to be like, nope, you're playing today or you're not playing today.
Yeah,
it's going to...
Exactly. Yeah, so, you know, that's how you meet these guys.
Yeah.
And that's honestly how I met all those guys.
Yeah.
Was you get paired up with one of them in a state am, and pretty soon you're exchanging phone numbers and you're going out.
Or, you know, I think the hospitality is kind of unmatched in the golf world of, if I called up this buddy and say, hey, I've got an event or something going on down here, come stay at our house or let's get dinner. And it's, you know, it could have been years since you talked to them, but they would have remembered you from some way.
Yes.
And so that's super cool and obviously exciting for our organization now to be in the PNGA, and the opportunity to represent your state has now come back around.
Yeah.
Which I think is incredible because it could give us an opportunity to maybe show some of the Washingtons and maybe these places where it's a David and Goliath situation that David got some fight in them.
Yeah. You know, for most of our membership, they will not know what the Lamy Cup is.
Right.
For those that live in the Pacific Northwest, whether it's Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, British Columbia, that's a big deal. You know, one of those organizations hosts the event every year, and they comprise a team and go out and compete for a couple days. There's some serious bragging rights that go with winning the Lamy Cup. I mean, that's a highly competitive event, and that's one of my new goals is to you know, qualify to make that team. You know, whether it's the Ryder Cup or Birdie Juice or the old, you know, Cordes Cup, playing on a team in golf is not something we normally do. And so when you get the opportunity to do that, there's nothing more fun than not only playing for yourself, but playing for your teammates.
Right.
And so, representing Alaska would be a nice little feather in the cap, I think.
It would be. It's going to be cool, and then have the opportunity to, like you said, rub elbows with a lot of other unbelievable players from their own province or state, respectively. But, you know, anytime you get the opportunity to, you know, feel that pride of putting on something that says Alaska and competing for your state, I mean, it doesn't matter how big or small it is, but it's an amazing opportunity. So, well, we're going to wrap up here, and Rich, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching another episode of 49th Golf.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.